All right, hello, welcome to the podcast, Eat Better Food Today. I'm your host, Ken Cunningham. I'm excited to be sharing insights on why we believe that health and longevity begins with the food we eat. The goal of this podcast will be to inspire, educate, and enable folks to live a healthier life and do it affordably. My wife and I have been on this journey for over 10 years and continue to work on it every single day. Percent of the profits from this podcast will be put towards child hunger with an initial focus on the poorest suburb in America, East Cleveland, Ohio. On this episode, we're grateful to have Mark Trapp. Mark and his family have a 30-acre farm on Route 303 in Peninsula, Ohio. The Trapp Family Farm is a countryside initiative farm, training interns on site as part of the new Farmer Academy in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Countryside is a nonprofit organization that the park established in 1999 to rehabilitate and lease the park's original farmsteads. Mark and Emily have farmed the site sustainably since 2012. In this episode, we'll explore Mark's thoughts on food, health, and longevity, and discuss why food has been so important to Mark and his family and everybody that takes advantage of your farmstead there.
Great.
So welcome, Mark.
Welcome. Nice to be with you.
Very excited to have you here today. So I always start with what you had for breakfast this morning.
Yeah, so we had a loaf of bread and some oatmeal. We've been alternating between oatmeal and eggs most mornings.
Mm-hmm.
I had been eating, I think, 6 dozen, or not 6 dozen, I've been eating six eggs a day, probably for the first half of our farm lease. And that really did a nice job of meeting my protein needs for the day kind of all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of gave me the energy I needed to get through what were then really pretty demanding physical days. We were doing a lot of the work by hand, and we still do most of the work by hand. We don't have much in the way of machinery on our farm. But I kind of saw my cholesterol ticking up, and I'm not sure if that was related to eggs or not. So we decided to shift to kind of every other, shoot and do every other. But I'm not convinced that the eggs were the problem with that. You know, I have a family history of higher cholesterol.
As do I.
And so yeah, that was this morning. We try to get ourselves and our children hydrated and food in their bodies as early as we can in the day. But you know, this morning we were a little less successful than we'd like to be with the kids. So, but we very much made that a central part of our life, is having a breakfast, sit down breakfast where we eat something that's ideally from the farm, and spend that time with the family. And then also the same thing for dinner. We really don't eat out. You know, it's a handful of times a year where we're going and eating out, and we're cooking every day, which is wonderful.
We have all the resources there.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we've been eating a lot of potatoes. You know, we'll mix those into breakfast. Often try to do 2 meals at once. You know, if we cook potatoes the night before, which is a lot of nights, then we'll parboil enough to have some for the morning for a quick hearty breakfast. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And my son is on a yogurt kick and maple syrup. You know, he likes his yogurt with peanut butter, cinnamon, and maple syrup. So we'll get him started on that. And while we're not producing our own dairy right now, that has been a long-term goal of ours. We had a false start early in our lease where we got 2 Jersey cows and raised them up from calves, and we just really didn't get the things in place we needed to do that well, and we ultimately decided to scale back that and move in a different direction, focus more on our pasture and poultry operation and growing produce. And now we're shifting into an orchard, which will hopefully be grown with as much fertility from the farm as possible. That's kind of been our goal from the start, is to harness the sun's energy, draw up all the nutrients that are deep down in the soil, and make those available to the crops we're growing, to try to produce some really, truly nutrient-dense food that doesn't require much, if any, off-the-farm inputs. So.
What kind of orchard?
So primarily apple.
Okay.
You know, there's an orchardist that I had followed for a number of years. He passed away in his 60s the last few years, and he said ancient wisdom or old wisdom was where there are red oaks, apples will do well. So we have red oaks down in our end of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and early indications are good. This will be their third leaf, their third year growing. So we might get a fruit or two off of some of those, but we're going to really look at growing good wood and framework for those trees so that we have a long-lasting and really productive, healthy orchard. For the remainder of our 60-year lease, as part of the Countryside Initiative program, we have 6 decades to work with on our farm, and we're through 12 of those, and really looking forward to the remaining 80% we have, and hopefully that's full of lots of fruit and continue to produce.
What kind of apples do you?
So we have a variety, not the typical ones you'll find in supermarkets around here, but one that's specifically geared for this region is a yellow apple called Gold Rush, which you harvest late into the year. I mean, they would probably, well, if not for the cold snap we had a few weeks ago, you could probably be harvesting them now. They're really hardy on the tree down to 22 degrees, and prior to the cold snap there in January, I don't think we had really been much below 20 all year. So I think based on some input I've gotten from another orchardist in the area, he said that is an apple he's had growing and really does well. So that's, I'd say 15 or 20% of our orchard right now, and we'll see if those continue to grow well when we add more blocks to the orchard. We'll probably work that one in. There's a variety of other apples. Honeycrisp is a really popular one.
Yes.
That is one you'll find. So we have just a handful of those. They're particularly challenging to grow, and we'll see if we can tackle those issues. I believe they're a hyper accumulator of potassium, which makes it difficult for them to get the calcium they need. Those two elements kind of work against each other. And then that often results in bitter pit little spots on the fruit that you make it essentially something you can't sell. I mean, you could sell it to someone who appreciates locally grown fruit. So yeah, those are probably the two most popular we have, and then I think it's a full suite of 15 total different apples. We've also have a few pear trees and plum trees and peach trees. So I'm really excited about peaches. I've learned a lot about those in the last few years, and we're going to put in another handful of those, and I think over the long term we'll see. They're really kind of finicky with the cold snaps especially, but there's certain things you can do, painting the trunks so that they don't heat up on a day like today and kind of start to break dormancy on the trunk, and then at night when the sun goes down you lose all that heat. And if it's 20 degrees out, it's a real shock to them, and it's that sudden change that as I understand it, that can kill a peach tree rather than just the outright cold. So yeah, we have a lot of fun challenges ahead of us and on the road to producing really nutrient dense fruit, which I think is really kind of lacking in the area just because there are so many challenges surrounding it. Most of the organic fruit in this country is grown west of the Rockies. There's just a lot less humidity and disease pressure out there. But I'm excited. I've been researching a variety of different growers and approaches, and I think I'm optimistic we can get ahead of a few of those challenges. Yeah.
Well, I know at the farmers market Shaker Square that I go to, the peach stand is very popular in the summertime.
Yeah.
So it's always got a line.
Sure.
To go by.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
So I can't remember who specifically that is. But
Yeah.
I know, but,
Yeah, there's not many out there, and if we could add our name to that list in 5 years, we'd be really happy. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and I also just read a book, and their author, I think her name was Sarah Lohman, but she was talking about basically varieties of things that have disappeared. She was talking about apples, and I guess there used to be like thousands of different kinds of apples.
Sure.
And now everything's kind of like, well, let's just focus on a few that people buy in a grocery store, and everything else has kind of gone by the wayside.
Right.
So.
Yeah, ones that'll stand up to being shipped
Right.
across the country. And,
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it'll be really neat to see just how much nutrient dense, flavorful fruit resonates with people. kind of have an ongoing debate at home, is putting this much effort into a fruit orchard, a good path. With climate change, there's going to be all sorts of challenges, with blossoms opening up early and then getting a cold snap. This past year we had a pretty hard freeze the end of May, which set back the one old apple tree we have on the farm. We ended up just getting a handful of fruit from that. But I think it's a challenge we have to accept, and there are things you can do, if you have an appropriate foliar spray on your trees, you can gain yourselves 5 or 6 degrees of frost protection, and in most years, if you get that timed up just right, I think you can get around some of the scary frost events in May. So yeah.
So another question I ask everybody in this, I'm going to ask you a little bit differently. So you were kind of talking about potatoes, eggs. So what do you kind of have as like staples in the home in February versus say August?
Yeah. So potatoes are a big staple. Winter squash are definitely kind of winter go-tos. But we're not, I don't want to misrepresent what we're doing. We're not eating exclusively what we grow. That is a long-term goal, is to produce more and more and ultimately round out our diet with what we produce. But, like a lot of families, we eat pasta. We buy organic and local, as we can. So we eat some pasta, and when the stars align, we make our own pasta with the kids. And usually that's like the birthday meal, as the kids want to make and roll out pasta. And we're trying to not romanticize, we're trying to sell our children on this style of life and the value of producing meals in the home. And I think if we were really dogmatic and we're only going to eat the stuff that we grew, it would make for some pretty hard and challenging times. We don't have the skill set that our grandparents and our great grandparents had to grow and produce all of our own food year round. But we look forward to continuing that. So to get back to the other end of your question, in August, it's lots of tomatoes and peppers. We're just starting to harvest our potatoes, so it's more potatoes. We eat essentially all the meat that we eat comes from our farm. We'll supplement with a little bit of beef from a nearby farm, local farm, but all the poultry we're eating is poultry that we've raised on our farm, from day-old chicks all the way up through being slaughtered and processed on our farm by us. We think that keeping production on the farm is profitable for a variety of reasons, but it also produces a lot less stress in the animals. When we process our turkeys, we align our grazing rotation, so that they are at the edge of the field a couple days before processing, and the day before I walk them down the path into the backyard, and the next day is admittedly a traumatic day for them, but it is, up until that point, it is as stress-free as it can be. They're out on pasture from 4 weeks of age on through to the finish, as with our broilers, and they're moved daily, if not twice daily. The chickens we move twice daily to fresh pasture. The turkeys are being moved daily, and it's really a lot of fun to see them eagerly running ahead for grasshoppers or whatnot. We actually had too many grasshoppers with the diverse forage and the warm, dry year we had this year. In September and October, my son and I were often racing out to the field after dropping the girls off at school to get the turkeys corralled because they had knocked over their fence, chasing after grasshoppers. So we're really after producing or creating as the best life we can for our animals on the farm. And that goes for our horses as well. We have 2 draft horses we use to do all the field work, and they get to our founding philosophy, which was to produce as much nutrient-dense food on the farm as possible while leaving the farm in a better place, and doing all that with a minimum of outside input. So in their case, we do spend some money on hay that we buy in, but we've been able to reduce the amount of hay they eat by 80%, a $2,000 savings over what we initially did by just growing more forage, by remineralizing our soils from the chickens and the poultry and the other animals we had on the farm to grow more forage for the horses. So that's been really exciting. They probably spend 70-80% of their life out on pasture, and if you drive by on Route 303, you'll often see them during the day, especially in the summer when the flies are particularly bad and the heat really makes it uncomfortable for them to be out on pasture. You'll see them in their stalls, and a lot of people say, do they ever get out of there? And if you're driving by at 9 o'clock in the morning to go to work and you drive home at 5, you'll see them in there. But I'm bringing them in at 7 or 8 in the morning because I've taken them out the previous night at 6 or 7 o'clock when it's cooler and we're done with work for the day. And they're getting an entire fresh paddock of grass. Usually that's just a 1/16 of an acre, a 50-foot by 50-foot square of fresh grass, and that's more than enough usually when there's plenty of forage. And then the following morning I'll bring them in, their bellies are full, we collect their manure, and that ultimately gets recycled through the farm, composted and recycled through the farm, applied on field a year ahead of time to help build those nutrient dense soils, which ultimately create nutrient dense crops. And yeah, that cycle continues. At some point during that following day, while they're in the stalls, or while they're waiting in between working, taking a rest, I'll go out and make a new paddock for them. And it's, I remember actually going out with your daughter Allison, who volunteered on our farm, and kind of going through that cycle. And I remember her words have stuck with me. She said, "This is how it should be on every farm." That this level of care and dedication to animals and kind of a holistic view. Not that we have everything figured out, because we sure don't, but I think the intentionality of it and thinking about the whole system was what she was after. So that was a nice thing to hear from her, and it stuck with me. So if she's listening, or when you see her next, pass along my thanks.
I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
I will pass that along. So I guess explain. I mean, you're kind of describing the whole. So you're not putting chemicals down. I mean, you're basically using the animals to kind of graze. They, I don't know, kind of explain that cycle. I guess you're kind of hitting bits, but just kind of
sure.
From a philosophical, it's kind of like it's a whole closed loop system, I guess.
Yeah.
Is kind of what I'm trying to get at. So.
That's what we're after. Yeah. So when we started the farm, we decided we were going to split up the market garden where we grow our produce for sale and for ourselves. We're going to split that up into half-acre strips, and it was going to be a pretty simple rotation. Year one, we were going to grow cash crops, produce that we were going to sell and consume ourselves. And the next year, we were going to grow cover crops that were going to be either planted with those cash crops the previous year, or once they were harvested, or into the next year, these cover crops, oats, peas, rye, vetch, things like that, usually a grass and a legume, which work really nice to help build soil and get nitrogen, fix nitrogen back in the soil, the legume being the more nitrogen fixer, and the grass being more the soil builder with its fibrous root systems. So that was our basic rotation, very simple. 1 year cash crops, the next year cover crops. And then it kind of branches out from there, a lot of different options. Depending on what you're growing in that third year, you're going to tailor your cover crop in year two to make things, easier to plant. If you're planting an early season crop like onions, you're going to want to have a cover crop in year two that's died back and out of the way. If you planted rye and vetch, something that makes it through a winter and creates a lot of biomass in the spring, you're going to have all sorts of issues getting your spring onions or carrots or beets planted. So I kind of fell in love with that, kind of the chess match that is crop rotation and balancing cover crops and cash crops. So that all came from a farm in Pennsylvania. We built off of their rotation plan that they've been doing for 30 plus years. Eric and Ann Nordell, who also farm with horses on their farm, Beech Grove Farm in Trout Run, Pennsylvania, went and visited their farm and had been reading all the articles they wrote to the Small Farmers Journal. So it was really fun to get my hands dirty and work with that rotation, and we saw some early success. And we took a little different path than them. They're primarily produce. They've had a few chickens over the years, but we wanted to raise chickens in a more substantial way and incorporate those into the fallow fields. You know, there's food safety concerns. You can't have them on top of your cash crops for sure, and you really have got to be careful with having poultry or any animal ahead of growing cash crops. So we're 90 days, if not 9 months, break between those animals and bringing in cash crops. But the idea was to use those animals to remineralize our soils right from the start. You know, when we took soil tests, even before moving in, the soils were really deplete of a lot of the nutrients needed to grow healthy crops. And I had met with a more conventional agronomist, and I asked him, he was telling me how bad things were, and I said, well, what could I grow if I just plant right now into this? And he said, basically nothing, you know, not much. So his recommendation was to put on a bunch of soluble synthetic fertilizer, which I wasn't going to do. You know, a lot of that stuff is really destructive to the soil life. It really goes well beyond the chemistry. It's really the biology that's driving a healthy plant growth, nutrient-dense plants. And the more we learn about the soil microbiome, you know, the more that rings true. Is if you can get the biology right, and really that's by feeding all that bacteria, fungi, and a whole host of other things, feeding them a steady diet of whatever they eat, usually dead and decaying plant matter year round. You know, it's easy to dump compost on once a year, a lot of compost, and think you've done your job, but it's a whole lot more complicated than that. If that's as simple as it was, or if it was simple as throwing on a bag of 19, you know, we wouldn't need all the insecticides, pesticides, herbicides that follow those applications, both in a conventional set of growing and in an organic scheme. Really, you know, you put on compost, and it's not a cure-all. You're often following that up with organic pesticides and insecticides, which are organic, but those are also often harmful to the soil life. So we've really sought out a gentler approach by using these animals ahead of time, and we're really starting to calibrate that more and more. We think maybe they're doing a little too much, and as I read books and read the work of others, Helen Atto has written a book, The Ecological Farm, that just came out last year, I believe, and she is cautious of what chickens do to spiders. You know, they eat a lot of spiders, and spiders don't reproduce that often, and if you've eliminated your spider population, you've eliminated a beneficial predator that can keep things in check. And so her book's been pretty instrumental to our progression of how we're going to treat our farm and what we're going to do with our animals. We're now going to take chickens out of our main production field and shift them to other fields. We have 2 other fields, smaller fields, which will eventually be in an orchard. So we're going to use those animals in those fields to build up the fertility there, probably do some more soil testing after a number of years of that in our main field, and see if we can work the animals back in there, the chickens back in there. Or it might just be that it's time for the animals to find another farm to revitalize and remineralize, and we can kind of maintain the balance that we've hopefully achieved in nutrients and more or less be on cruise control. And maybe sheep fit into that rotation. And we had a bit of a scare the other day when it was freezing and thawing. Sheep got out of their electrified netting and got into a couple of the apple trees. So I don't think they killed them, but I look forward to more mature trees producing tons of fruit, sheep coming in at the end of the season to clean up the drops, limit disease pressure, and maybe coming in at the beginning of the season before there's a food safety concern. So yeah, I get real excited about the whole chess match of moving animals and plants and crops around, and I think that eventually comes through in the quality of the stuff we produce, and we get people knocking on our door and asking, when are your carrots coming? It was a really challenging year this year weather-wise. We had really extended periods of dry, warm weather when we were trying to get crops planted both in the spring and the fall, which threw us for a loop. And then in between those seasons, we had extreme periods of wet, 10 inches of rain from mid-July to mid-August when we're trying to get those carrots and beets planted. And sadly, as a result, we just did not have those crops. So we had a lot of disappointed people, including my daughters and son and myself. But yeah, we've learned a lot from this year, and I think it'll ultimately lead to us being a stronger farm, a more resilient farm, because I know the weather challenges, the climate challenges are going to keep on coming. And yeah, we were really taken aback by the air quality issues we encountered in June, to the levels of it being unhealthy to be outside from the wildfires from Canada. And, there's things we can do to plant and get the crops in differently, but when the air quality index is 300 or more, it's hard to work outside.
Yeah.
And it's hard to see your animals outside.
Really unusual event. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was.
So we'll see what comes of that.
So why don't you maybe take a second and talk about the Countryside Initiative Farm and kind of how that's part of kind of how you came to be, I guess.
Yeah,
from that
exactly.
standpoint.
Yeah, so it's really a revolutionary program, unique to this park. It was founded back in 1999, I believe, by Darwin Kelsey, the founder of the Countryside Conservancy. He partnered with John Debo, then the superintendent of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, to bring the third partner in this organization, in this three-way partnership, sustainable farmers, to bring them into the national park onto farmsteads that had been renovated by park staff. There's a home and surrounding fields in each case, for farmers to put a proposal into the park, and then have that proposal be reviewed. This was open to public. I submitted a 60-page plus proposal for our offering, and then after that initial review of those proposals, the park chose a handful of farmers to come in for like a panel interview. So that was a lot of fun for me to talk about what the next 60 years of my life might look like, and ultimately was accepted. That went up, I believe, all the way through the Midwest office. I don't know if there was national sign off on it. I know I remember seeing the Midwest regional director, his signature is on our lease. And then it was several months after that for everything to kind of get in order, and move into the farm. But we are currently one of 9 farms in the Countryside Initiative program. And there's a handful of farms still in the park available, not currently available, but which I hope will become future Countryside Initiative farms. As we've seen our journey progress, it's gone from just kind of making it work. Can we make this work? Can we farm with horses? Can we do it profitably? And we've succeeded in doing that. And I really hope the remainder of our lease can be continuing to do that, continuing to be profitable, but also producing farmers, new farmers. If we can over a decade produce one new farmer a year, by having 2 or 3 employees on our farm and having them stay for 2 or 3 years, each year we'll then be producing one really good farmer who can go out and hopefully start their own farm, have the financial wherewithal, have the skill set that I didn't have. So when I moved on, I was farming for 3 years on a quarter acre, half acre, and then an acre of produce and selling that through a CSA. So I knew a little bit, but I didn't really know what I didn't know, and now I have an inkling of what I don't know, and I feel like I can help people get to where it took me 5-10 years to get much quicker. But if we can be producing one of those farmers a year, and they can go out and each one of those farmers can produce one farmer a year, in 20 years, I think that math works out to over 100 new farms, which is something pretty exciting for me to think about. And if you continue that progression, you get to 1,000 new farms, you get to 10,000 new farms, by the time we're ready to wrap up our lease. I think that would that would really be a nice crowning achievement to put on the end of our lease, is to have created, not directly, but indirectly, through our work. So,
well, there seems to be more interest in younger people, younger than me, younger than you, that are interested in farming. I've actually read that, for a long time, small family farms were decreasing, but they seem to be coming back. They seem to be on the rise right now, last 5 years. So
yeah, that's a really encouraging trend. And the Countryside Initiative is going through a few changes. The Countryside Conservancy more so is going through a few changes, but they're really have a firmer footing now, and I think they're well positioned to help continue that trend and move small family farms forward.
So, would you say your farm is profitable?
Yes, we are. Yeah, we believe it or not, the pandemic was kind of a turning point for us. We went into 2020 having decided to scale back our operations that winter, so it was prior to the pandemic arriving. We had decided in 2019 that winter of 2018-2019, after kind of going full bore with 2 full-time employees. At that time we had an intern from the Countryside Conservancy, and we were doing as much as we could, a full diet CSA for a handful of families, which worked well. It gave us the revenue we needed up front to invest and make small improvements to our farm, but it was just getting to be a little bit too much. We really didn't have the buildings and the facilities in place we needed to support 2 employees, that type of CSA, and a growing family. In 2018, 2019, we had two daughters, both under the age of 3, and we thought maybe we'd have a third eventually. So it was just a little much. It kind of all came to a head, and we decided we've got to scale back. So we did that. So 2019 was kind of a recalibrating year, not that profitable, and we made some big changes going into 2020. And it was interesting during the pandemic. We didn't have childcare, so I was watching my kids, and which was incredible, to get to spend that much time with my children. And then it made me focus so much on the farm when I wasn't watching the children, and really prioritize the work I did. And ultimately that led to the 2 most profitable years we had in 2020 and 2021. And since then we've had another 2 successful years. Definitely not getting rich doing this, but our expenses are pretty minimal. My wife, Emily, works part-time as a nurse and helps with benefits. But if our circumstances were different and we were both farming and had been farming from the start, we could certainly be surviving and not having a huge savings account or anything like that, but we could be surviving and in a good position. But a lot of that is I was fortunate enough to come out of college debt free, thanks to my parents, and just being given a whole lot in my life that a lot of people haven't been given a whole lot of opportunities, and so I'm in a unique position there. But I think it's possible for folks to do it, and there are lots of people doing it. Lots of young people doing it. And
so why, you used to be an engineer?
Yeah, that's right.
And now you're a farmer.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I kind of went into engineering by default. I remember being a senior in high school, really not knowing what I was going to do. Nothing had grabbed a hold of me. And I was good at math, had an interest in science, so engineering kind of seemed like a natural fit. My dad is a structural engineer by trade, no longer practicing. And my older brother, is a structural engineer, no longer an engineer. So they both got me into engineering and got me out of engineering. They both showed me a path in and a path out. They both left the engineering profession to pursue other things. My brother has a couple of businesses, successful entrepreneur, and I kind of followed in his footsteps. He's actually the one who told me about the Countryside Initiative.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my eye on the program probably for 5 years prior to applying. I had been working off some previous proposals that are available online. You know, there was a whole list of 13 questions. So
Mm-hmm.
I had started writing a proposal long ahead of time. And, but prior to that, a college roommate, good friend of mine, he suggested reading a few books on food, The Omnivore's Dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
So I read that, and you know, a lot of the farmers in there kind of piqued my interest, and they were doing things in a way that we've tried to emulate and improve upon. And I started reading books by those farmers, and then the farmers that they mentioned in those books. So I just kind of started branching out with this more scholarly approach to farming, and ultimately ended up getting my hands dirty. I moved back to Cleveland. I had been working in Cincinnati for General Electric for their aviation division, which was interesting work, and I think I could have had a really successful and interesting career as an engineer there. Had signed papers to move down to South Carolina to work for GE Wind.
Mm-hmm.
I had a particular interest in renewable energy and wind energy in particular. So, but to be honest, I really was not feeling it moving down to South Carolina. Had some stuff happen with my family, and decided my place was at home with my family, and that I wanted to be doing something more locally, more aligned with my philosophy. I wanted a life that I could spend close to my children, and the thought of spending 60, 70, 80 hours a week in an office, which is what my future looked like based on all the engineers I was working with that were in following the progression that was expected of people. So yeah, I think I was naive enough, passionate enough, and got a hold of the dream at the right time to take some crazy leap of faith. That's kind of what I did. I kind of had a moment where the firm I was working for in Cleveland, I'd come back from GE, was farming part-time, really farming full-time, 50 hours a week, and doing this engineering job 40, 50 hours a week. And they said, look, we need you to make a decision. Are you going to be with us, or are you going to take another course? So I said, I can't in good faith, continue to divide my interests. And I had a moment on this field in Brooklyn Heights where I was leasing land from a guy. He allowed me to lease it for free for 3 years. And I remember it was a Sunday, I was planting a cover crop, and I said to myself, like, why am I not doing this full time? This is what I love. I can give this a go. I don't have kids. I don't have a family. I'm young. I can work hard. I have a good work ethic. If this farming fails, I'll come back to wherever, and I'll find a way. So
engineer can always find a job. So,
yeah. So that's kind of how I made the leap. And I met my wife shortly after taking that leap, and she came with me. Bless her heart. And yeah, she's just been a perfect partner. Not an easy partner, but that's exactly what I needed. And I think what our farm needed was a committed and loving and caring partner. She's got a deep love for animals and ecology like I do. So it's really been a magical journey to grow with her and see the farm grow and raise a family and produce food together. It's really been a good hard life. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about, obviously you're growing things yourself. You said you did do supplement, but there's been a lot of, actually at a conference in DC on Thursday talking about food is medicine. There's been a lot more interest from a lot of people and what that means, and this whole thing about ultra processed foods and whole foods, and just so what's your kind of philosophy on food as medicine? I mean,
yeah, I love the idea. I guess I don't know if I always come across as humble, but I do try to be humble, and I don't want to over-represent the food we're producing. I think we have a long way to go to really get to the point where we are truly producing food that could be thought of as medicine. There's a guy that has a great podcast, John Kempf, and he has a similar philosophy. He has a plant health pyramid. It has 4 levels, and it's not trivial to get to level 1, even where your plants are reaching their full photosynthetic potential. Not to mention getting all the way out to level 4, where your plants are fully immune from any sort of insect or pathogen. And he thinks once you get to that level 4, which few, if any, farms anywhere are doing, but once you get to that level, once you really have the biology tuned in on your farm, and it's not something you can do overnight, but if we can get to that level, he feels like we can really get to the point where we can have an honest discussion about calling food medicine. I think we've done it in instances where we've gotten to level 4 carrots, where we've grown carrots that have been immune to anything, and maybe in a few other instances, but I look forward to getting to that point. We certainly steer clear of processed food when something does find its way into our house, not by me, but other people. I like to read the ingredients out loudly. It's just something I encourage people to do in supermarkets. It might get you kicked out of a supermarket, but it's going to keep that junk out of your house and out of your kids. You know, there's not junk food. I heard somebody say this the other day. There's not junk food. There's food and there's junk, you know. And I think it was Jonathan Sawyer, well known throughout the Cleveland food scene, who years ago, he was a big fan of the Countryside Farms, came out to our farm, and he told me he'd go into supermarkets and do this, where with his kids he'd just read out the ingredients, which is a good radical approach. I think that's necessary.
Well, a lot of times you can't, even reading the ingredients, it's hard to pronounce the ingredients. So if you have trouble reading it, you probably shouldn't be buying it.
Exactly. Exactly. The forces of agribusiness are so entrenched and invested, and they can sure make things shiny and colorful and, you know, attractive, but just flip that whatever you are buying over and take a look at the ingredients, and I don't want to put titanium into my children's body, you know. So steer clear of that.
So how about any stories from some of the interns you've had? I mean, of just somebody that worked for you and then maybe went on to do something positive afterwards?
Yeah, so our very first full-time employee, Kelly Powers, worked for us for 3 years, ultimately ended up splitting off after that 3 years and going off to start her own enterprise in Medina County, right on the border of Medina and Summit County, and she really helped us through a challenging transition period there when we hired her a month before our oldest daughter was born, and we had a couple meals a day with Kelly in our kitchen, and I think if it wasn't for her and a handful of other people, our farm would have, you know, failed out long ago. So she had a history growing in Montana and in Cleveland, and just had a real passion. It was clear from the day I met her that she had the passion necessary, you know, to be successful as a farmer. So it's been really fun to keep her as a friend after she's moved on and started her own thing, and see her be successful. She's still helping us. Her, along with the other full-time employee, Catherine, that we had previously, prior to our scaling back, are still on our processing crew, and the three of us have really gotten to a level of proficiency that makes processing poultry on our farm really profitable and to be honest, fun. You know, it's stressful getting things ready for that day, but the process itself is really smooth, and we do it outside, open air. It's all stainless steel equipment, but they're just so good and you know, chatty and fun to be around. So that's kind of exactly what I envisioned when we started this farm, was creating crews of people like that, where you're really not working, you're just kind of hanging out, and, you know, producing food and having a ball while doing it, sweating and, you know, being a little bit uncomfortable, but that's all part of it. It can't be all convenience and you know, producing really good food at the same time. So
well, it sounds like your kids are having a good experience on the farm.
they are, yeah. They, you know, specifically to Kelly and Catherine helping out on processing day. It's a day that children look forward to, and are so excited to see them arrive on the farm. And I think it's probably so empowering for my girls in particular to see women on the farm farming well. What a great example for them, at what is undeniably an extremely challenging time for young women in this world with all the various forces that are out there. So I'm very thankful for Kelly and Catherine and my wife Emily providing such a powerful example for them going forward. So
we were just talking about giving birth.
Yeah, the lambs are having this morning. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun for them, our children, to come out and see new life coming to be, and kind of seeing the role we play as human beings to shepherd that life through a healthy life on the farm, and ultimately to perpetuate that. I think that's really valuable life lessons for them.
So how do you any thoughts on one of the topics we talk about is longevity, but kind of being on a farm, kind of the full life cycle you see, and kind of your activities other than last June as far as getting outside? I mean, how do you feel that I'll say positively impacts longer lives?
Yeah, I think it's so important to be outside. The way we've structured our farm, there's tremendous amount of walking. I'm putting in well over 20,000 steps a day, for 8 or 9 months of the year. Maybe a little too much walking and too much carrying of stuff that's taking its toll on my body physically. But as far as mental well-being goes, I can't think of anything better. We are on a highly trafficked road, so there's kind of that cacophony of, road, automobiles coming by. On the other hand, it allows us to sell everything we do produce on our farm, which is, we're truly unique in that sense. I think for me, early on, there was this excitement of being outside all the time, and that very quickly changed over to how do I protect myself from the hazards of being outside, not just the air quality issues we mentioned last June, because that is very real and will continue to be an issue, but just the sun and the wind and the weather, all those things when you're outside, as much as a farmer is, can really, really destroy your body quickly. I'm 41 years old, and I really hope to still be upright and checking on animals when I'm 89 and entering into the last year of release. I don't plan to be carrying a whole lot of 5-gallon buckets of water then, but I think that's been top of mind for me, especially this winter. I had 2 knee surgeries prior to farming, old sports injuries, but I've been doing a lot of physical therapy in that respect, and maybe more specific to me, but I think it's worth everybody considering, how do we best shield ourselves from all these challenges that our bodies are going to face over our lives. I was just thinking this morning, I don't know if it was related to this podcast or whatnot, but I had a middle school teacher who told our classroom, you all live to be 100 years old if you take care of yourselves. And I sure hope that's true. But it's not going to be as easy as he, said in an offhand manner. I think, we've really got to get our diet right and get our mental health right and stay active is really so essential. With our animals, with our farm animals, we've heard specifically with the horses, the best way to keep them healthy is to keep them active and moving. And we often get questions this time of year, especially when it's a more stout winter, as to whether or not they are okay just being outside. And we've shown over the 12 years we've had them that they are. They're most comfortable from 15 degrees Fahrenheit to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So when it's single digits, they're a little uncomfortable, but give them.
I'm a little uncomfortable when it's single digits.
Sure, and I go and I eat a good meal and I warm up and I feel good, and there's some satisfaction that comes in that. You think it feels good not to just coast along at 65 degrees all day long, you know?
Yeah.
It feels good to go outside and get invigorated. And I think I haven't read the research, but there's some research about, cold showers. And I think that's all the rage on various social media,
Cold
taking
plunges,
these cold
showers,
so I can't tolerate that level of cold in a shower, but I think it does feel good to get outside, and I hope it's the same with the horses, but we are really cautious with them. When it does get down below 15 degrees, we bring them in so they're sheltered from the winds. We give them extra hay, plenty of bedding, but yeah, ventilation, fresh air is really key for them. And as I was starting to say at the beginning of this, before I digressed, really keeping them active, I have heard from countless horse farmers, is key to keeping them healthy. So we are out working them, harnessing them up, not so much in the winter, but they are out running around in their paddocks, grazing right now. And then during the work season, they're out every day just about doing something, keeping their muscles active. And so we'll see. They are 18 and 19 years old right now, and I'm hoping to get on into their 20s in good health and eventually have facilities built where we can bring a horse or two in to transition them out, where they can help teach that new horse or that new team of horses how to do the work. Something tractors can't do, one of the great joys of having horses instead of tractors. An old tractor can't teach a new tractor how to farm, but you can harness a young horse up to an older horse, and they can show them how to do the work. So I'm looking forward to that. But as with anything on the farm, safety is top of mind. Talk about longevity and health. And if I do something stupid or careless with the horses on the farm, that can be game over real quick. And as much as I wax philosophical and romanticize the horses, safety really is top of mind with them, and as being as close to the road as we are. So we've fenced in half of our farm, our largest field, with a good sturdy deer fence. That's allowed us to bring up production and invest in an orchard, but it's also given us peace of mind with the horses when they're inside those 16 acres. So we had set aside the money this past year. Things didn't quite line up with the contractor to get the rest of the farm fenced in, but we're just real excited to do that as far as safety goes, to have all our fields fenced in, and to be able to use those fences to keep the deer out, which are a huge pressure. It's been hard and heartbreaking. There's been a couple nights where I come in nearly in tears after watching the deer run off with all the nutrients we've worked so hard to put into carrots and spinach. So to see them dash off into the woods and eliminate thousands of dollars of produce and take all those nutrients off into the woods and down into the river, it's been kind of heartbreaking. But we've solved that problem, which is exciting.
Good.
So yeah.
Good. So, if you had the attention of the world for 5 minutes, what would you want to say?
Wow. Yeah. I think I'd need about 5 months to prepare for a 5-minute message to the world.
You can make it one or two.
One or two, yeah. I think I would gear it towards selling people in their teens on just how exciting and useful human beings can be in this world, and how your livelihood can be producing food. It doesn't sound that exciting. I heard something the other day, my wife shared that 20% of teenagers aspire to be social media influencers. Farming may not sound as exciting as being a social media influencer, but I can assure you, after doing it for 12 years plus, 12 years on a full-time basis, that farming can just make you feel so good and useful. There's not a day where I don't feel incredibly useful. We have animals, we have plants that depend on me. My family depends on me, and that prospect, I think, has the potential, if that story can be told well, and that's my hope, is in addition to training young farmers, that I can inspire more farmers, and show them just how amazing being a farmer can be, and how worthwhile it can be. I think it's really going to be essential that we get nutrients into the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
There's countless challenges facing this world, and I think the best way to approach that long term is to get the nutrients into our children as soon as we can, so that they can reach their fullest potential and have the confidence and the charisma to face the challenges that are going to face humanity over the coming decades. And
yeah, well said. Yeah, and I kind of, that the conference they had, this food is medicine, at least as a step in the right direction for the U.S. I kind of feel like the European Union's a little bit ahead of us as far as what you're talking about, as far as the way food is produced. And
agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So
yeah.
hopefully we'll catch up soon.
I hope so.
So the last question has to do with a recipe.
Sure.
So recipe that you could recommend people could make, family of 4,
Sure.
under $25. Everybody's not gonna have a farm to go get food from, but
Sure.
and they can make it in less than 30 minutes. What?
Wow, that's a good question. So I was always a fan of omelets growing up,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always been a fan of breakfast for dinner. So I guess when you posed the question, I don't think you said dinner specifically, but I'm thinking of a dinner meal,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm thinking of omelets for dinner. One of our main products that we produce on our farm is pasture-raised eggs, pasture-raised from April until the middle of January this year, at which point the chickens come into a hoop house, just gets too cold and dangerous outside. But we sell a dozen eggs, organic feed. We haven't gone through the full certified handling process, but we produce certified organic fed eggs, and we sell them for $6 a dozen. In the store, it maybe cost you $7 a dozen. But I think there's enough there, even if you did 2 dozen eggs for a family of 4. If you're real big eaters, I guess that's 6 eggs per person. So depending on who you're feeding, that's either going to be more than enough or just the right amount.
Probably
but if you
depends on how old they are.
right, yeah. If you couple that with the little bit of oil or fat or butter you're going to need to grease the pan, and some vegetables you've purchased, they're not cheap, but you can buy a quart of peppers from us for $5 or $6. You can buy the tomatoes you would need. I think you could easily get to having a nice nutrient dense, if you chose vegetarian omelet.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be cheaper than buying ground turkey, or buying a chicken from us. Our chickens are a little bit pricier. In the Omnivore's Dilemma book, Michael Pollan, well, I think it was actually his another book he wrote, Simple Rules for Eating Food, or eat food, mostly plants and not too much. Meat certainly has its place, but you can get a lot of nutrients from really well-grown produce.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's my half-hour meal.
Okay.
Is a veggie omelet. I think you'd easily get there in under $25. Gosh, that might be dinner tonight. We'll see. Actually, I think we are roasting one of our chickens. But yeah, we keep that in the back of the envelope. Yeah.
Great. That'll be a first. So I've been asking this question for all the guests, and then I will make them up for a Sunday dinner for my family.
Oh, excellent.
And then I'll take pictures, post the recipes on the website so everybody can have access. So we have not had an omelet yet, but that's it's a great idea. There's been a lot of chicken lately.
Yeah,
chicken
sure.
dishes. So
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else you want to share with our audience, or maybe where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, so we are on Instagram,
Okay.
Trapp Family Farm. That is currently our only social media account.
Okay.
If you're interested in getting on our mailing list, which is sent out quarterly, you can email us at trapp.family.farm @gmail.com, and we'll add you to that list. We are slowly working on a website here after 12 years. It's not been 12 years that we've been working on it, but we're trying to get things off the ground here this winter. We do have some fairly ambitious infrastructure plans that we hope to develop and get built over the next 3 years to really get us to the point where we can be bringing on 2 or 3 full-time employees, producing enough food to make that possible. But first, we've got to get those buildings built.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'd recommend folks either coming out, saying hello. Sometimes I'm tied up with my children, they can't answer the door right away. But I think, yeah, emailing us ahead of time and getting on that mailing list would be the best way to communicate with us. If you're just interested in buying eggs or garlic this time of year, as that is all we currently have for sale, stop by the front door. We've got those for sale daily. We do our pastured meats through our email pre-order list. And yeah, we hope to have a couple of more speaking engagements over the next 6 months. So yeah, keep an eye on Instagram for information on those. Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
All right, let me, I want to close here with I have my first sponsor for the show. So it's Zimmer Real Estate Group, part of Keller Williams. And you might ask, which I did, why would you have a realtor sponsor a health and longevity show talking about food? Well, Bob Zimmer, who is a friend of mine, has agreed to take a percentage of his commissions and put them towards this new center we're trying to create in East Cleveland. So there is a tie-in because the new center in East Cleveland will have food, clothing, kind of area that needs some fresh produce, quite honestly. So, so Bob is a sponsor. I'll post a link on the podcast as well as on the website that you can kind of check out. So please follow our show every week where you listen to podcasts. Leave comments below or on the website, Eat Better Food Today. Gratefully yours, Ken. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.